was just reading a few pages from a fascinating book. It is literally filled with countless pieces of wisdom. One in particular deserves quoting. It reads, "Vengeance is mine." Now that's a powerful quote. And from what book am I reading? The Bible. That's right, the Bible. Now let me ask you a personal question. At some time in your life, has someone ever made you so angry, so upset, that you considered some form of retribution, some form of revenge? Of course you have. You wouldn't be human unless you did. Revenge is a natural emotion. The only problem is that we are all raised to consider revenge as being juvenile, immature. Society does not condone such lewd displays of conduct, at least not openly. And that is why we are here. Hi, I'm Linda Blair, welcoming you to How to Get Revenge. During this program, you are going to become quite literally an expert in the field of revenge. Now, when I talk about revenge, I'm not talking about bodily injury to anybody. I mean, that is definitely not our purpose here. Our aim is to simply inform you of the options you have to make that person experience the same humiliation, the same mental anguish that they inflicted on you. You are going to learn dozens of tricks of the trade from some of the top experts in the field, including private investigators, former police officers, and other virtuosos of vindication. You will also discover invaluable techniques of retribution, some simple, some more elaborate, but all designed to obtain the goals you desire. And you will also see and hear fascinating stories from people just like you, who were at one time victimized, yet came back to achieve the ultimate revenge. Let's face it, revenge can be sweet, especially when it's against someone who really deserves it. And I'm sure we all know a few of those, right? Former friends, lovers, business associates, family members. The list is virtually limitless. And you know what? We all practice revenge on a daily basis, and we don't even realize it. Example. Have you ever tried to change lanes on the freeway, but the idiot in the other lane won't let you?
Yeah, you! Woo! Come on! Yeah, you!
So what do you do to get even? Well, when he tries to merge into your lane, you block him out. Now you've had your revenge. Ever since childhood, we've been practicing some form of revenge. Remember as a kid, ordering a pizza by telephone and having it delivered to another kid's house that you disliked? Sound familiar? Or maybe you remember this classic bit of adolescent revenge. The idea was to fill a paper bag with fresh animal droppings, the fresher, the better, then place it on the victim's doorstep. Once done, you'd light the bag on fire, knock on the victim's front door, then run to his backyard. Then when the victim arrived, usually the neighborhood grouch, he'd have no choice but to put out the fire. Meanwhile, you'd run to the victim's back door and begin pounding on it. This would cause the startled victim to run back through his home, soiling his fine shag carpeting with animal droppings while you've made your clean exit. Fasten your seatbelts, for now it's time for us to explore the more serious forms of revenge. We've assembled several of the top professionals in the field of revenge to guide us through this endeavor. First off, we're going to meet private investigator Mark Lewis. Mr. Lewis has aided hundreds of victims in getting even and is considered a master in automobile retribution. Next up is investigator Kyle Pappenfuss, who will give us pointers on how to cause havoc with a Mark's home. We'll also hear from a presently active police detective who we'll refer to as JM. He will enlighten us with his vast knowledge of seeking revenge by mail. And then there's Officer PF, another presently active police officer who will show us the many ways your telephone can cause tremendous damage to your enemy. But first, let's begin with private investigator Quinn Vickers. Mr. Vickers specializes in getting even with former friends and lovers. Mr. Vickers, could you give us an example of what could be done to a former friend or lover?
A few examples, huh? Okay, let's talk about friends. I had this client whose best friend came to him and talked him into investing in a real estate scam. $10,000 talking. He promised my client that he'd get a 75% return on his money within 3 months. And being that they were good friends, well, my client didn't think that his friend would screw him. Well, he sure did. And the worst thing that happened was that when he found out that his so-called friend had made approximately $3,500 on the deal. And that's when my client first came to me.
What did you have him immediately do?
Immediately? Nothing. Not a damn thing. You see, the secret with revenge is patience. Patience. If he were to act right away, his so-called friend would have caught on. And he would have called the authorities or done something in return to my client. And that would have meant he won again, and my client loses again. So you wait. In this case, I waited a couple of months. Then I hit him on several levels. First of all, I took a death certificate, whited out the former information, filled in his name there, and along with a letter stating that I was his wife, I sent the death certificate and the letter off to the Bureau of Internal Revenue and the Social Security Office. Next year comes tax time, he's screwed with the Internal Revenue. Down the road a ways, when he wants to change jobs, he's screwed again. And way down the road, when he finally wants to collect, no Social Security benefits.
Hit him in the pocketbook, eh?
Better yet, hit him while he's down. After all, my client wasn't the heavy here. He was just trying to even up the score. Next, I made appointments for this punk with several professionals, doctors, lawyers, dentists, you name it. And I'm talking dozens here. So when he doesn't show up, he's got a lot of pissed off professionals. Not only that, several of them, as you may well know, will bill him for not showing up.
Ouch. I'd sure hate to be him.
Yeah, so would I. But remember what the Bible says, an eye for an eye. Remember, this guy did my client in. Okay, then I finally topped off the whole escapade by severing his marriage. This took a little work, but it was worth it. For several evenings, I waited outside of his home and watched to see if he'd leave home at night and at what time. Eventually, he did, and I noted on what day and what time. I then waited until he returned and made note of that time. Once I had proof of one of his evening treks away from home, I purchased an inexpensive woman's shoe from a local store. I then wrapped it in a small box. Then, using the letterhead of a local hotel, which is free, available in most hotel lobbies or rooms, I typed a letter saying the following: Dear Mr. and Mrs., and I put their last name in there. When the two of you were here on the evening of, and I put the date the man left home, your wife forgot her shoe. Here it is. We'd appreciate the return of $2.50 for postage. Thank you. The management of, and I typed in the hotel's name. Anyhow, to make a long story short, the upshot of the downshot is that his wife finally files for divorce. He has to sell the home, the cars, the stocks, everything. I guess you could say my client finally came out on top.
Boy, I'd have to agree. Imagine that, breaking up a marriage to the U.S. mail. Amazing. But what's even more amazing is the many other ways that you can use the post office in a vengeful manner. And to give us a few examples is Detective J.M. Detective, could you give us some examples of revenge by mail?
Revenge by mail is only limited by the person's imagination. For the most part, the examples I'm about to give are ones I've learned while on the job, although I must admit a couple of them are my own creations. But let's get to it. One of my favorite pranks is very simple, but very effective. It can be a real pain in the butt. What you do is go down to your local post office, get a change of address form, fill in the victim's name and address, and the new address. It can be anywhere your heart desires, from around the block to around the world. And if he also receives gifts or valuable items in the mail, I suggest making the local Salvation Army as the new address, or any other place which might benefit from such items. Another way to create havoc and also make your victims shell out money is to look through magazines and catalogs. There are a lot of expensive items in there that can be bought now and paid for later. So order as many expensive items as you can and mail it to your victim's address. Another thing to do is to join these Book of the Month clubs, Record of the Month clubs, or whatever of the month clubs. Ever try to get off one of those lists? Can you imagine being in 10 of those lists?
I'd like to play a little game with you, if that's all right. I'll give you a situation, and then I'd like you to respond with a method of male revenge that you would recommend.
Okay, shoot.
Let's say the Mark is a family man. You know, a wife, 2 kids, a dog. What can you do to disrupt the entire family as opposed to just the Mark?
Put them on offensive mailing lists. Pornographic mailing lists, such as pornographic magazines, pornographic merchandise. Put them on the Communist Party's mailing list. There are hundreds of mailing lists you can put them on. What husband wants his kids looking at this stuff? And, for that matter, what husband wants his wife thinking that he subscribes to these lists? Another thing you can do is send your Mark's wife a pretty box of chocolates. And a note saying how much he loves her and all like that. It's one of my favorites.
I'm confused. How can sending a box of chocolates and a nice note to the Mark's wife get him in trouble?
Did I forget to mention mixing chocolate laxatives in with the candy?
I guess you did. Well, that ought to flesh out the situation. Okay. How about if your Mark is a businessman?
Send the sexually perverted magazines right to his office. Can you imagine the looks he'll get when he gets his stuff right on the job? These bizarre toys and sexually perverted magazines? Should be quite a thrill. By the way, there are dozens upon dozens of homosexual and bisexual magazines available today. I found if you mail these to the Mark's place of work, you can start rumors or quickly get him fired. And if you can get a photo of the Mark, it's even better. Send that to a gay magazine along with the requisite money and place an ad for a gay lover. Then when the copy comes out with his picture and the ad in it, send that to his boss, his wife, or his girlfriend.
Fascinating. Well, how about if you have a bone to pick with your neighbor?
Try this. Get some printed invitations made up, announcing a Sunday afternoon brunch to your neighbors, announcing the date, the time, the directions, the whole enchilada. The fancier the invitation, the better. Mail it to his people at work, all the neighbors. Then sit back and watch the hassles begin.
Not that I want to know, but how can you ruin someone's marriage or love relationship?
Here's what I learned years ago. If the Mark is a man, just type a letter up saying, "Dear Deborah, my name is," and put the Mark's name there. I saw your ad in Swingers Bazaar this last week, and I'm hot to trot. I'm anxious to get it on. But you can't reach me by phone because I'm married. But you can reach me at the address on the envelope, but mark it personal so my wife doesn't see it. Put that letter in an envelope marked Deborah Lawson, care of Bazaar Swingers ad, box 1268A, Charleville, Arizona. Of course, there is no such address, so the post office will return to the Mark's home. And sooner or later, the Mark's girlfriend or wife is bound to discover it. And then the fireworks begin.
What else can you send in the mail that will irritate your victim?
Things that smell. I mean, things that really stink. I mean, animal droppings, human droppings, overripened fruit and vegetables, fish. Imagine what a week-old fish smells like. It smells like Boston in the summertime.
Well, Detective, thank you very much for your suggestions.
Now, you're welcome. Oh, by the way, when do I get paid for this?
Oh, don't worry. The check's in the mail. Now let's rejoin investigator Quinn Vickers, who has a visitor with an interesting story that many of us can relate to.
You know, it's a common fact of life that there are those people out there, a small number, but nonetheless they're out there, those who feel that they have to stress their superiority over others. Some do it at their work with fellow workers, some do it at sports, on the athletic fields, some do it in their love life. Yet there are just a few who feel a great need to stress their superiority over decent, honest, basic human beings, such as my client, Mr. Harold Jerriman over here. Harold, why don't you pick it up from here?
Well, the incident took place on Thursday afternoon during my lunch break. I was eating at the little diner across the street from the library where I work. Everything was perfectly normal. It was then that I first noticed him. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him, being more interested in my meal. However, it soon became evident that he was a troublemaker.
Hey, I see a good place to sit. Come on. Yo, buddy, mind if we eat here?
Well, actually, yes, but there are other tables available.
I know that, Wimp, but I want to eat at this one because I want to watch my truck, you understand?
If you give me a moment, I'm just about finished.
Oh, just about finished, huh? Well, I can't wait. Besides, it looks to me like your order's to go.
I was terrified. I had no choice but to leave. As I was leaving, I noticed the man's license plate number and made a mental note of it. I was so humiliated. This kind of thing happened to me many times in the past, and I wanted to get even with that man. I looked upon him as being all the people who have hurt me rolled into one, and that's when I contacted Mr. Vickers.
Well, when Harold first came to me, he didn't know what to do. All he had was the punk's license number, but that was enough for me. I went down to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I filled out a form stating that, I had a small accident with this guy, and I was just checking to verify his address. Within a couple of days, I had the punk's address. Now, Harold here was adamant about getting even with him himself, so we laid out a battle plan. Harold, you take over, buddy.
With pleasure. Once I had the man's name and address, I decided to start off with what the man apparently wanted: food. So from a payphone across the street from the man's apartment, I called about 15 takeout restaurants and had them send him all types of food. And I had them spaced out so that they would arrive about every 15 minutes. Let me back up a moment to tell you that there had been a series of robberies at a local convenience store chain. Now, with that in mind, I planted a toy handgun under the truck's seat, and I threw in a city map with the locations of the convenience stores circled in red and a few newspaper clippings about the robberies. Then I went to a telephone and phoned the police and stated anonymously that I had seen where the robber lived and that I had seen his gun in his truck. To make a long story short, the police arrived just as the man was getting into his truck. When the police saw the gun, the map, and the newspaper clippings, well, let's just say that the man had a lot of explaining to do down at the station.
How do you feel now?
Confident. Of course I don't go causing trouble for other people, but at least I know I have the confidence in myself to know I can get even with anyone.
Confidence, a quality we all desire, yet surprisingly few of us possess. However, most of us do possess one of these, a telephone. And it so happens that this is the revenge seeker's greatest ally. And here to enlighten us on this subject is Officer P.F., whose looks we have electronically altered to protect his identity.
I'm going to be demonstrating several methods of phone reprisal using my own personal phone. Now, some of the techniques that I'm going to talk about can be done in your home, but some of them are going to require the use of a payphone, and I'll explain that as we go along. Now, first of all, if the prank you're going to pull requires you to talk to the mark yourself on the phone and the mark recognizes your voice, then I suggest that you use a handkerchief placed over the mouthpiece of the phone. Now, I know that you've seen this in millions of movies and TV shows, but the fact remains that it works. Now, before we get even with that certain low life in your life, let me just ask you a little question. What is the most valuable possession that a human being has? You give up? The answer is time. Time is precious. Don't you just hate it when somebody wastes your time? And time is money, too. So, when you get a mark to waste his time, you're getting him in more ways than just one.
Now, I've found this particular routine to be very effective when the mark is married or living with their lover. Now, if the mark is a man, you get a close female friend of yours, like my friend Monica here, to help you out. Now, if the mark is a woman, obviously you're going to do just the opposite. Now, let's assume that the mark's name is Bill. Now, when Bill leaves home, you get your female friend to call up his home phone number, and when his mate answers, you get her to say something like this.
Oh, hi. Is Bill, never mind.
Then you have her hang up the phone. And this will definitely sow seeds of suspicion into Bill's relationship. And if you follow up with a late-night phone call, hanging up without speaking when the mate answers the phone, well, then you'll really foul things up a lot. If your Mark happens to be in a business where he meets customers in various locations, then don't disappoint him. Using a fictitious name, set up meetings at various locations around the city, in restaurants and bars and hotels. And then by the time he's traveled around town and he realizes that he's been burned, he's wasted lots of time and money. Monica, why don't you tell everyone what happened to you recently and exactly what you did about it?
Okay. I was working as a temp in this office, and I was only supposed to be there for a couple of days. And immediately I had trouble with this nasty tramp of a secretary who'd been with the company for 20 years. Well, she told me I wasn't even competent enough to make coffee, and she complained about everything I did. Well, after 2 days of this, I had had it with her. So I phoned her boss. And when he answered the phone, I told him I was with a rival company and that his secretary recently applied for work with us. And then I continued on and asked him questions about his secretary, if she was good, had good work habits, etc. Anyway, to make a long story short, the boss, feeling betrayed, fired the woman. And guess who took her place?
Don't you just love happy endings? Now, a while ago, I mentioned that sometimes you need to use a payphone. Now, there can be several reasons for this. For instance, say that you placed a revengeful ad in the newspaper. Most newspapers will require you to leave a phone number so they can call back and verify that you're not just a crank caller. In much the same way that a restaurant that makes deliveries will require you to leave a home phone number so they can check and make sure that the order is legitimate. Now, one thing that you must never, I repeat, never, ever do is leave your actual home phone number, because this could lead to a lot of trouble. Now, here is one where you will definitely need to use a payphone. Call your Mark's spouse or lover and tell them that you are the spouse of one of your Mark's co-workers. And say that you have proof that your mates are having an affair. Tell them that you hired a private eye who has shown you photos that made you cry. And if the mate doesn't believe you, you say,
"Well, if you don't believe me, here's my home number. Give me a call."
Then give her the payphone's number and hang up. And when they call back, add a few more sordid details about the affair. Oh, and an emotional quiver in your voice when you do this will just add to the realism. Now, let's toss it back to our host in the studio, who will give you a rundown of my 5 favorite phone gags.
Number 1, call plenty of salesmen for an in-home sales pitch or demonstration. Number 2, start or cancel services to Mark's Home, such as the gardener, pool man, cable TV service, etc. Number 3, order food from restaurants that deliver and send to Mark's Home. Number 4, if you know any of your Mark's reservations in advance, call to cancel them. And number 5, call charitable organizations and donate goods in the Mark's name. This will cause much embarrassment when they arrive at the Mark's home. Interesting thoughts, to say the least. Now let's rejoin investigator Quinn Vickers, who is joined by a young lady with a fascinating story.
Wherever there's love and romance, there's also pain and deceit. Approximately 75% of my clients come to me with problems in their love life. Belinda here was one of them. Belinda, why don't you tell them about it?
Well, a couple of years ago, I was going to college to become a nurse, and I did not think of myself as very attractive, was not very popular, and I met this guy at a pep rally. His name was Frank, and we went out, had a good time, and he asked me to go to a game, and later found out that he was the head cheese on the football team, as they put it. So anyways, we went out, we had a good time, had a great time.
Were you happy together?
Yeah, we were very happy together. In fact, we were so happy, I was hoping that he was going to ask me to marry him. And then Victoria came along.
Let me explain that Victoria was a very popular, attractive girl. She was also the head cheerleader.
I guess she just became attracted to Frank. She started hanging around with us a lot, and I really didn't know what was going on. And she became quite flirtatious. And then I got really hurt. I found out that she was sleeping with Frank. And then I got angry. Really angry. And that's when I called Mr. Vickers.
I make it a point never to get personally involved with my clients, but, well, Belinda here reminded me so much of my daughter that I just had to get involved. Well, Belinda told me she didn't want to hurt Frank. She felt he was just being victimized by Victoria. So we planned our attack directly at Victoria. The revenge was aimed at her. First thing we found out was that Victoria had dated several guys around campus. An awful lot of them were on the athletic teams on the university. So then I had Belinda set up an appointment at the free clinic for an examination.
Well, this was great because not only did I get a free pelvic, but I also got a free examination. And while I was there, I got a letterhead from the free clinic, at which point I brought it back to Mr. Vickers and he told me what to do.
I had Belinda find out the names of the various athletes on the, well, as a matter of fact, all the athletes on all the sports teams around the university. Then on free clinic stationery, I had her write a letter to each of them. The letter stated that Victoria had been to the free clinic and had tested positive for syphilis, and that each of them were sexual partners in this little peccadillo.
So on Friday, I sent all of the letters to the athletic department at the college. And on Monday, well, whoa. Needless to say, the athletic department would have nothing to do with Victoria. None of the students would have nothing to do with Victoria. No one would touch her. No one would talk to her. She was treated like she had the plague, which pleased me to no end.
So tell them what ultimately happened.
Well, after 2 weeks of humiliation, she transferred to another junior college and again became the head cheerleader. And she had her jollies for a while until I again sent the same humiliating letter to the athletic department, at which point there was no more Victoria, and I have no one but Mr. Vickers to thank.
Well, stories like that certainly make my day, as do the talents of our next guest. His name is Mark Lewis. His occupation, private detective. His specialty, car revenge.
Now, probably the simplest way to aggravate your Mark is to tamper with his tires. And the simplest thing to do here would be to unscrew the valve cap and let the air out. Now, the best thing to do would be all 4 tires. But if you don't have enough time, make sure you do the front tires. That way it's hard to steer and your Mark can't drive off that easily.
Now, a lot of people recommend putting glass or nails under the tires. But believe me, for the best results, let the air out yourself.
Now, one thing that every car needs is gas. And this car is no exception. Now, if the situation warrants it, and you need to damage the engine, the best way of doing that is adding some things to the fuel, like baking flour, sugar, regular granulated sugar, or glue, epoxy. Now, this will certainly damage the engine, cost a lot of money, cost your Mark a lot of time, and it will certainly drive your Mark crazy. My clients are always asking me for an easy, efficient way of providing their Marks with a massive headache. Well, I have just the thing. A locking gas cap. Now, you can buy this gas cap in any auto parts store, a couple of dollars. What you do here is remove the unlocking gas cap and replace it with the locking gas cap. You just screw it on here, turn it, take the key. That's the important thing here. You have to take the key. Then when your Mark goes to fill up, he can't get his gas cap off. provides a massive headache. Come with me.
Okay, here's one that dozens of clients have tried, and it really works. Take a can of black spray paint, spray the headlights. That way your mark will not be able to drive at night till he has them replaced. Now, did I mention what you can do with a license plate? You can remove it and hide it. Or better yet, replace it with an out-of-state plate. Now, while we're down here, way in the back is the exhaust pipe. What you can do with that is take a potato or some other solid object, stuff it into the exhaust pipe, and the engine won't start. Do that at night, and your mark will be late for work. Now, if you're fortunate to get under the hood, there are a lot of things we can do here. Okay, let's start over here. This is where you put the windshield washer fluid. But instead of putting the fluid, what you put in is cooking oil. What happens then, when the mark starts his windshield washers, oil goes all over the windshield, which attracts a lot of dirt and a lot of dust. All right, the next thing here we'll deal with is cooling system. The idea is to put substances in there that expand with water. Baking flour, pancake batter, or even paper mache. Now, you can also put sand in here. Sand does not expand with water, but it will certainly do the job. Now, speaking of sand, this is where you put the engine oil. Put sand in there, and you will certainly damage the engine. Now, last little tip here, the distributor coil. Take one of these coils off, put chewing gum up into the coil, put it back on. Now, that will cause the car to bulk, to possibly even stall. The great thing here, though, is when the mark takes the car to the gas station to his mechanic to try to get it fixed, it's almost impossible to find out what's wrong with it. Now, you do not have to be a mechanic to do all these things. You just have to be a little mad. Happy motoring.
Aren't you glad he's not your mechanic? Whew. Now, let's check back with investigator Quinn Vickers, who has a few more tantalizing ideas to tease your vengeful mind.
Here's a few miscellaneous ideas you might try out on your marks. Sending a letter is a beautiful trick, and it works so simply. All you need is a plain piece of paper, and you cut out the letters from magazine or newspapers, right? You gotta say, "Dear so-and-so," the mark's name, "I know what you're up to." Now, if he's like most people, he's got something he's doing that he shouldn't be doing, and he's gonna feel guilty, and he's gonna wonder who knows about it. And even if he hasn't done anything recently, you're gonna drive him up the wall wondering why anybody would send something like this to him. Now, if your mark is a member of the minority, you might turn him over to the Immigration Service. This is gonna cause him hours and hours of endless paperwork trying to prove he's a citizen of this country. Listen to what one of my clients did.
I've been having some problems with my next-door neighbor. I loaned her some money, and you know, she just refused to pay me back. So I was getting a little irritated, and a friend of mine told me to call, Mr. Vickers. And I did, and he was very nice. And what he told me to do was call the Internal Revenue Service and tell them that she had a business on the side and was making money, and, she hadn't been reporting her income. So what they did was, when I called up, I told them that I was a concerned citizen, and what I found out a little later on was they called her in for an audit, and they decided to, go back 5 years and try to find out what happened to this money. And from what I gathered, she's been making, weekly trips down there, and I would imagine it's been a little bit of an inconvenience for her, but, whatever. And I would think that she's probably there right now.
Always keep in mind that a newspaper is a great source for getting even. One of my clients placed an ad in the mark's name, advertising that he was going to have a big moving sale. Everything in the house going for 1/5 of its cost. And needless to say, he picked a time, a weekend, when he knew the mark would be home relaxing, right? The guy was inundated by bargain seekers, ruined his weekend, ruined his life. Another cute trick is to place an ad saying that you are the sucker and you have $50,000 that you're open to any and all investment possibilities. And of course, you include the mark's phone number. Well, needless to say, the phone will be ringing off the hook with all the cuckoo birds out there who have the great investment possibility. You want to make your mark real paranoid? Listen to what another one of my clients did.
My former boss fired me for no damn reason whatsoever. So I put his name in the obituary column in the newspaper. And making sure that he received it, I mailed it to him with a note saying, "Someone out there is watching you." Then I put an ad in one of those gay magazines and put his name and number, and that worked in several levels. First, it affected his marriage. Then every time that phone rang, I can just see how paranoid he really was. Just jumping out of his seat. Then just think of the cost of him having to change the phone number and contact all his friends. This guy really deserved it. I enjoyed it.
You know, a newspaper's a great source for revenge. Be inventive. Check it out. You're going to come up with dozens of ideas of your own.
You know, Mr. Vickers is right. You don't have to be an expert to create some wonderful revenge techniques. We've been receiving dozens of letters from people just like you, detailing some delicious bits of revenge. A woman from Fort Worth, Texas writes in telling us how she got even with a former friend who owned a popular vending machine. She stuffed cotton way up into the change return slot. This had a twofold effect. One, it upset her former friend's customers because the machine wouldn't return their change. And two, when the woman returned a few days later and pulled out the cotton, she hit the jackpot. A man from Tempe, Arizona wrote in saying that his favorite prank is to phone his mark from a payphone, preferably during the day. Then once his mark answers the phone, the man simply leaves the payphone's receiver hanging off the hook, effectively tying up his mark's phone line for hours until the phone company can reconnect his service. Keep those cards and letters coming in, folks. Question: name the location where the average person feels most secure, most comfortable. Answer: their home. Naturally. After all, a person's home is their castle, right? The only problem is that none of us have a moat to protect us. Meet private investigator Kyle Pappenfuss. He's about to take us on a tour of what one can do to a mark's home.
All right, first things first, the mailbox. Easy pickings. Everybody has a mailbox, and everybody reaches for their mail. Who says you can't put more than mail in there, huh? How about some pancake batter, motor oil, Jell-O, pudding? Anything can go in there. Just close your eyes and think of something nasty you wouldn't want in there. Get the picture? Practically every homeowner takes pride in a really beautiful lawn. It's considered part of the pride of ownership of a house. Of course, to me, it's just a gigantic opportunity. You see, a little weed killer in a bottle like this can work wonders on a lawn. See, it not only kills the weeds, it kills the grass. So you can spray this over and make all kinds of designs on somebody's lawn. As a matter of fact, you could even spell out obscene words. In a couple of weeks, when the grass dies, wham! You'll have trouble with the neighbors for the next month. Okay, we're at the front door. If you're really looking for a way to tick off your newfound friend, how about the doorknob, the keyhole? Some nice epoxy glue right in there. This is going to cost them not only aggravation, but money, too. And another nice thing about the front door, most front doors have a mail slot. And you know where mail slots go? The living room. That's right. Now, you only do this if you really want to get back at your newfound friend here. Because a lot of times they put hoses right next to the front door. And you know what you can do with that hose? You can run it right into the mail slot, right there. You turn it on, you split the scene, Captain Happy comes home, and he can paddle his way to the telephone. Now, while we're at the front door here, what better way to get to your mark than by leaving a message on that very same door? Say he's got somebody working for him, like a gardener, a pool man, a bottled water guy. You can leave a message for them on there. Like for the pool guy, for instance. Say, drain the pool and give it an acid bath. That's usually a couple of $100. Or better yet, for the gardener, those expensive hedges. Pull them out. Put in pumpkins or palm trees. Or you can get that bottled water guy. Leave a message from the mark saying, hey, stop making nice with my wife. I know what you're doing. I'm on to you. Hey, there's thousands of things you can do with messages. Be creative. Have fun with it. Now, if he has a pool and you can get access to it without anybody seeing you, whew, what a gallon of cooking oil wouldn't do for that pool, especially the filtration system. Hey, and when the swimmers come out, they have this beautiful glowing slime all over them. Now, if your special someone happens to have an air conditioning unit like this, buy yourself a nice little jar of salmon eggs like this. You can get it at any sporting goods store. Open it up. Ooh, dump it in the main filter unit. And in a couple of minutes, they're going to think they're living in Newark. Looks like Captain Happy's problems go back a few generations, huh? Well, if you get inside a house like this, here's a couple more things you can do that are fun. Firstly, the thermostat. This is a heat thermostat. You want to turn it all the way up on high, especially on a nice hot day. And then you take some glue out, and you pop it right in there so it stays on high. A couple of hours, they're going to have that sauna they've always dreamed of. The kitchen is a limitless source of retribution. One of the neat little things I like to do is switch the labels on the canned goods. Peas, carrots, onions, with other kinds of canned goods. Things like menudo, corned beef hash, dog food. Imagine the surprise when you open up what you think is a can of salmon and there's nothing but dog food in there. Pretty good gross out, don't you think? Now, when most people open the refrigerator, they expect to find food inside. What if you got there ahead of your mark and, say, put some dirty laundry in there, huh? How about that? Look at this. Quite an impressive little fruit salad, huh? Oh, what do we got here? Oh, it probably belonged to the pool man, huh? Wait a minute, what do we got here? Ooh, little breeding room in there, don't you think? Well, if that doesn't gross them out, you could probably think of 1,000 other things that will, all inside the fridge. Think about it, get the big picture, huh? Finally, here's what my father taught me. Now, if the house has a dishwasher, and these kind of cupcakes usually do, you just open it up, and you get all the good dishes, and you jam them inside. And then you get a packet of dye, just like this, and you stuff it inside. You shut it, you let it mix around, and their whitest china is going to look like a Rorschach test. Well, that's it for now, kids. Just remember, trashing your enemies can be a lot of fun.
Thanks, Kyle. And now, to wrap things up, let's pay one last visit to our experts as they tell us their favorite act of revenge.
My sister's husband one day just finally decides to leave. Takes off to the Bahamas with some other chick. Then he sends her a letter about 3 weeks later saying he wants a divorce, but he needs money. He tells her to sell their 1986 Porsche. She can keep half as long as she sends him the other half. So she puts an ad in the paper. Brand new 1986 Porsche for sale, $10. The phone rang off the hook. First guy that comes along, she sells it to him for 10 bucks. She keeps 5 and mails her husband the other $5. But the topper is she starts dating the guy that she sold the car to. Ends up marrying him. She gets a new husband and gets to keep the Porsche.
You know, my favorite act of revenge is really the oldest one in the books, but I love it because of the payoff. All you have to do is call your mark as many times as possible during the day or the evening. And every time you call, you ask for Peter or whatever name comes to mind. Now, after 4 or 5 times, the mark is going to be a little irritated. After a dozen times, he's going to be pissed off. And after a couple of dozen times, he's going to be violent. Now, you stop calling at about 10 o'clock at night. You wait until about 2 or 3 in the morning, and then you call him up again and you say, "Hi there, this is Peter. You had any phone calls for me today?" I know that it's silly, but it's still my favorite gag.
Oh, shh, don't tell my wife. Look, let me tell you my favorite revenge story. Just happened. A friend of mine, a construction worker, just went through an ugly divorce. His wife and he argued constantly over who was going to get the convertible. Well, he lost. And of course, his ex-wife kept rubbing it into him. So I suggested that one night he get a cement truck, which we did. We went over to the house, and there was the car parked in the front with the top down. So what did he do? You pour the cement into the car, right up to the top. I guess you could say that their relationship was cemented, but a little too late.
You know, this may not seem like anything extraordinary, but I like it because it works so smoothly. I like checking the mark's mail. I take out the bills every day. I do this for a couple of months, even the ones, and especially the ones that are overdue and last notice. The funny part is the mark won't even notice this is happening until the utility companies turn off his telephone, his gas, his electric, etc., and he'll have a lot of fun listening to those bill collectors pounding down the deadbeat's door.
I had a buddy once who got evicted from a house he was renting. What buddy? It was me. Yeah, And I wanted to get back at this landlord. I wanted to get back bad. And he lived so far away, I thought I'd pull something off real sweet. So I decided to sell his house. That's right. It was really, really simple. All I did was call a real estate agent. Real estate agent comes down to the house. We sign the papers. I tell them, hey, sell it for half of what it's worth. I want to sell now. They make the deal. By that time, I'm out the door. I don't want to talk about what the final result was, but I wonder what happened to that down payment.
So there you have it. I truly hope that you have enjoyed this edition of How to Get Revenge. It has been our pleasure to inform you of the options you have if and when you should find them necessary. It is also our hope that you will never actually have to use any of these methods. Excuse me. Hello?
Yeah, is this Linda Blair?
Yes?
Yeah, Linda, my name is Rick. Listen, I was driving down the street past your house a few minutes ago, and I saw some smoke coming from your house.
Oh my gosh! Oh, well, thank you for calling. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, I have to go. I hope you had fun. Bye!